we're going to be talking about, are you ready for new beginnings? Now, I think you are. Each and every one of us are. And you know, I walk away. What a great song. I walk away from the past, but what we bring with us are all the positive things that have worked in the past. We let go of the stuff maybe that didn't work. We let go of old ideas, and we step into new ideas. And so a new beginning is all about seeing a vision, seeing a light, having an understanding of what you want to become, individually and collectively. And as we move into that new division, that new beginning, remember from a couple messages I did that the stages of transition, that next slide, the stages of transition say that there is an ending. Now, there was an ending with Reverend Paula. And it was a sad ending for some of you, I know that. Because she was loved, she was phenomenal in what she did, one of the best ministers in the music, one of the best ministers in the movement, as far as I'm concerned. And you were blessed to have her here. And even Richard, who came with her, okay? And so, anyway, as we've moved through this, and it's been a few months now, it'd be just about a year come December, when she decided to make that change. It was called to make that change, remember that, please, and did so beautifully. And so what happens is that we then go through a transition. We've been going through a transition here. Some people think the best thing you can do is immediately get a new minister. Well, that's easier said than done. And what studies have shown is if you immediately get a new minister, they last about 2 years. That's because that's what their contract says. They last 2 years. So they've really become an interim minister, a transitional minister without meaning to. So it's wise to take the time so that you go through this void that you feel, through this sense of not quite understanding where you are or what you're doing and why you're here. And as that starts to clear up, what happens is we get ready for the new beginnings. And I think that you are ready for those new beginnings right now. I think the right minister will be called here. And I want to remind you, called here. Not just for a job, but called here to be a part of your lives, to make a difference in your lives, to support you, and to support the board as the board does the work necessary to create a vision of what you are to become. And so in the new beginnings, there is a story in the Bible, a pretty long story as a matter of fact, about Moses. Now, I used to get up and say, everybody knows Moses, but today I don't say that anymore, because one Sunday I said that and one fellow raised up his hand and said, who's Moses? Okay? And so I understand. And Moses was a character in the Bible. He goes back, he's probably one of the most influential characters in the Bible, and there's a story about Moses. And most of you will remember, know the story, that Moses was raised as an Egyptian, as a prince. He knew that he was Jewish, though, and so therefore one time when he saw a soldier beating a slave who was Egyptian, or who was Jewish at that time, he killed the person and he ran away. But he ran away, he thought, from Egypt. But what he was really doing was running away just to find out what he needed to do. To get out in the wilderness, like we all can do. To find out, where am I and what's my role? What am I supposed to do with my experience and my time? And so he ran into a burning bush. And what he heard was the message, I am because you are. You are because I am. That's a metaphysical interpretation. It didn't say it quite that way in the Bible. But anyway, and he understood that, and then he did the thing that we all do, why me? I mean, I stutter. Moses did stutter. Okay? They may kill me if I go back there. Because he knew what was happening. He's having a call to go back to Egypt and to deliver the people of Israel into a new promised land. And so he goes back. They go through a number of things, and finally Pharaoh is convinced that, yes, you can let the people go, and they go down to the Red Sea. When they get down to the Red Sea, Pharaoh changes his mind. And by the way, there's nothing in history that says this happened this way, but it's a great story. And so when he got down to the Red Sea, what happened was a fire took place and kept Pharaoh and his forces away for a while. And the one thing that Moses did that was so powerful was he stepped into the Red Sea and said, "Follow me." He didn't stand on the shore and say, "Follow me and let's hope the water opens up." He said, "I'm going to step into the water, come with me," and the sea's divided in the story. And they got to the other side. Thank you. I want you to be here saying amen all day. Thank you. And anybody else too. So anyway, when they got to the other side, what happened was, of course, they thought they were going to go hungry. They were in the wilderness, and they were going to take us back home. You ever felt that way? I want to go back home. I want things the way they used to be. But do you really? And so Moses takes the children of Israel for 40 years, it says, and they marched around in the wilderness. Now, that wilderness is probably 10, 12 miles wide, actually physically. So what did they do for 40 years? For 40 years is the amount of time it takes to change and be ready for a new beginning. It's not a specific 40 years. It just symbolizes when you are ready, you are ready. And so they come to the promised land. And when they get to the promised land, one of the things that happens is that Joshua and a friend of his, I've forgotten his name, is it Joshua? Yeah. Go over and they check out with several other of the Israelites. They check out this new village on the other side. And they come back. And Joshua and his friend says, "We're not ready." The others said, "Not only are we not ready, you can't believe how big those people are over there. You can't believe what giants they are. I mean, they'll wipe us out." And of course, that brings in fear and concern and whether I should do that or not. So have you had any kinds of situations in your life where you're saying, "Hey, I got a problem, and boy, it's bigger than I am"? And what happens? We turn to fear, which doesn't work. And that's what happened with the Israelites. And so Moses said, "You're not ready to go. Go back. Go back out in the wilderness." And again, they went out, and supposedly they went out for enough time for a generation to pass, so that anybody who was older that was there when they tried to go into the promised, thought about going into the promised land, had passed away. Now they had new blood. They had new people, new thinking, new ways of being. And so they finally got to the promised land, and as we know, they went over into the promised land, and the walls of Jericho crumbled. So that is a story of transition. That's a story of how we have been and how we need, what we need to become in order to begin in that new beginning. And so one of the things here at Unity is that, and slide please, and is that we have a transition going on at Unity Renaissance. Nobody's surprised by that. But what I wanted to do as a transitional minister, report to you some of the things that are happening and have happened over the last 10 minutes. Most of them had nothing to do with me, so I'm not taking credit. Please understand that. These were happening because you have got a great staff here. Number one, we completed an audit to make sure all the money was where it was supposed to be, and it is. Number two, Alicia installed Breeze, a new database program. Some of the volunteers already know about that. It is hands-on. It is friendly. You can go to it. You can look up information. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. And it's user-friendly because I can use it. Okay? And so anyway, we have this thing called Breeze. We've done the landscaping. The landscaping committee got behind it. Paul got behind it. The funds were there, and we were able, the board provided more funds. And as you've seen outside, the landscaping is beautiful. And there's even more work going on in the backgrounds. At some point, we'll invite you back there. And then we brought on a bookkeeper, Wanda. And Wanda is a member of the church, and she is our bookkeeper. And so she's being trained to do all of the bookkeeping on Quicken, which is our software. And she is helping us understand how to be more efficient with our financial matters and reports that are available to us so we know what's really going on a day-to-day basis. And then we did a who and what session where we looked at the demographics. Who are we? Who do we want to become? Why are we here? And we talked about that, and there was a report done on that. And then we have the search team. Again, I have very little to do. I sat on the first parts of it, but when I start interviewing people, I do not participate in that. That's kind of a conflict of interest. They're doing a great job. And we're looking for more candidates. We're affirming more candidates are going to apply. And then we have staff training and staff. The staff meets every week just about, and we have about a 2-hour staff meeting. Everybody clears out anything about everything, and they talk to each other and say, here's where I need help, or here's what I'm doing. So they're in tune with one another. And we had a staff training that Gail Boynton did on coming to the heart space, working from the heart space. And several staff meetings said that really meant a lot to them, staff members. So that meant a lot to them, that they understood that we work together from the heart space, and when we do that, any differences of opinion are differences of opinion, and that's all they are. That we can talk to each other. We don't have to be upset with one another because we have a difference of opinion. We work together and compromise and figure out how from the heart space we can become one as a staff. And I know that that has happened here. And so we are looking at all of these new beginnings. And these are some of the things that we've done during the last 8 months or so. And then the next slide says, envision your land of milk and honey. Okay? Because that's what the Hebrew children called Canaan, the land of milk and honey. It wasn't. They made it that. But it looked, that was the concept behind it. So they had a dream, actually. And so I had an opportunity in the 70s where I was sent to Disney World to do the training on creative training. And the cool thing was that the first day, the instructor threw out an idea. And he said, he threw out a concept. I want as many ideas about this concept, how we can do this as possible. And so about 2 people got up and started writing on a chalkboard. Chalkboard was all the way around the room. A couple people got up and started writing on a chalkboard. About a 3rd person got up and started writing down, and somebody said, oh, that's a bad idea. We tried that before in the group. The instructor said, no. There are no bad ideas. Keep writing. And before long, the whole room, all the chalkboards, were completely filled with ideas. And the idea is that we have lots of ways and good ideas, and the way to get that is by getting lots of ideas and throwing ones away. But you don't throw them away right away. You look at it all. And then what happens sometimes, you take the bad idea you think it is, put it with a good idea, and you got a better idea. And so what we want to do is be in this place where we have lots of ideas, and you are ready for that. And it's really up to the board and to the leadership to help develop that. It's not the new minister. It's a board and leadership that start to look at and define these ideas. Now, there's a process called the AI, and I know artificial intelligence has taken over, but this was affirmative inquiry. It's a process I've used for a lot of years. I found very effective. And what you do is that you, number one, you define what is our desired outcome. What are we going to look like? You can even paint pictures of it. You do a board on it, treasure board. You do all kinds of ways and try to figure out what do we want to look like. And when you get settled on what you want to become, what is our desire for our outcome, you then start a process of discovering your strengths. You see, affirmative inquiry is all about working from your strengths, not your weaknesses. Einstein said that you can look at your weaknesses and work on your weaknesses a whole life, but you'll only grow if you really use your strengths. And so you start to look at what are your strengths. And then the third thing you do is you start to dream together. What would work well in the future? You know, you guys have the resources. You have the congregation. You have the staff. In order to think big, to grow big, you can see yourselves in the community. Maybe satellites. I'm not recommending either way or one, but maybe satellites is a possibility. Maybe working with other churches to develop a larger community. Because one of the things that unity has the right to, and I say this, has the right to, is to understand that we have a message that can literally change the world, especially today. And we are capable of that, and you guys have the assets, you have the leadership, and you have the people who can make that happen. So think big. Think big. And then once you have that dream, you start to design. What action do we need to take to make it happen? And then you deploy. You do the work, the 5 Ds. And so, while you're doing that, though, it's very important in New Beginnings to follow, in the next slide, the 5 principles. These are in my word, just to keep them simple. There's only one source. One source, and that source is in you. You are able to demonstrate that source, is the second principle. The third simple principle is what you dream, you will demonstrate. And then, meditative prayer brings the resources that you need to make your dream come true. That's what really happens. And then when you have those resources, you define what you want to be. You then take action. And I love action because it's automatic if you've done the first 4 principles and kept those in mind as you worked. And so, as we follow those principles, let's just come to the next slide here. At the bottom it says, a rock pile ceases to be a rock pile the moment a single person contemplates it bearing within the image of a cathedral. Not true. So see your cathedral, not your rock piles. There is a story of a man named Sims. He was an officer. He was in the Navy in around 1900 to about 1920. And one of the things that was happening that he discovered is that there is called a process of aiming towards a target. And that sounds funny, for ships. But what he discovered was Britain had figured a way so that when they shot at something with their cannons off the ships, they could get right into the wave so that everything was still and they could hit their targets, about 75% of the time. The United States would take a ship and go out and do the same identical thing, and they would only see success about 3% of the time. In other words, they were missing the target. The best they ever did was there was an old sailboat that they were shooting at, and they hit the mast one time. Okay? And Sims says, well, there's something to this. We've got to look at this. We've got to figure out what to do, and we've got to put into being the process that the British are using. And so he went to the top command. He went everywhere he could. Nobody was listening. Here's what the top command said. Next slide. 1, our equipment is as good as that of the British. The difference must be the training of the gunneries. Number 2, the training of gunners is not the responsibility of the Bureau, but the officers of the ships in question. Number 3, therefore, and most importantly, continuous aim firing, that's what it's called, is impossible. Now, here's a man who understood the importance. And so World War II, or World War I comes up. And he understands, and so what he does is he has enough ability, and he knows enough people that he gets in front of Theodore Roosevelt. And he talks with Theodore Roosevelt. And he says, here's the idea, and I think we ought to adapt it. Theodore Roosevelt said, that's a stupid idea. He said, I'm going to make you the inspector of gunnery. You come up with this idea, you take it, and you work with it. So that's what he did for 3 years. This was before World War I. And so for 3 years, he looked at that, and he worked on it. And what happened was, as he learned the secrets of how the British did it, he trained our people to do that with their ships. To be able to bring the ship into alignment so that the guns could be shot out, so that you could be more accurate. After 3 years, they took 2 ships, and both ships hit 75% of the targets, which were 25 feet by 75 feet. You think that made a difference in our warfare, in our ability to protect ourselves during World War I? Certainly it did. But this was a man who had an understanding, a dream, and he wasn't willing to say no. And so what you and I can do is we can continue to work and live because we're not willing to say no. And so this next slide says, don't be pushed by your problems, be led by your dreams. That's what I want to encourage you to do. This morning and the rest of the time I'm here, one of the lousy parts of being a transitional minister is that you're working yourself out of a job. Yeah. But I knew that coming in, okay? And you get to know people. You love the people. They love you. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. But I do know that I'm working myself, and that's my job, out of a job. And we're getting close. And I think the right and perfect minister will be called here. I believe that. Look for that. Don't think about what they have to look like, their gender, anything else. Is this person, I see and know this person is called to unity of Renaissance, to help us define and understand and employ our dreams. That's when you're ready. And so I declare, you are ready. Amen. And so now, let's go into this time of meditation. This morning I'm going to ask you to, again, close your eyes. To take a nice deep breath. To release. Do it again. Nice breath. And release. And find yourself in this moment. Knowing in this moment, you can dream. Knowing in this moment, you can support through your consciousness the calling of the right and perfect minister. So be in the silence and feel the person that will come here. Don't worry about identifying. Don't worry about what they look like. Just feel the consciousness that you are attracting in this very moment. And affirm to yourself, as I dream, I can create. That my spirit and the spirit of the new minister are in sync and in oneness. And they feel a calling that they can't even explain. And one day, they will appear here as that new minister, ready, willing, and totally capable of loving each and every one of you exactly where you are. And so gently, gently open your eyes as we sing together and know the truth of who we are.